Well, hello, and welcome again to the 2012fad.com. I will be your host for this evening, and my name is Charlie Bluehawk. Last night, we talked about all governments are corrupt, and even though this video file is dated April 22nd, the truth of the matter is I'm a little behind the times, and today is actually the 1st of July. And just last week, the Greek government sold out its people to the international bankers forever, putting the people of Greece in debt till the end of time, whenever that happens to be. Despite the fact that the week previous to that, the Greek military was ready to overthrow the civilian government if they did such a thing. The Greek civilian government said they never would, and a week later they did. I have no idea what's going to become of the Greek people. They should have followed, of course, is what they wanted to do. They wanted to follow the example of Iceland. The people of Iceland knew that they had been lied to and robbed and cheated and simply said no to the bankers. And the moment you say no to evil, they're helpless. They can't do anything unless you give them permission to hurt you. The people of Iceland said, no, you will not hurt us again. So they're okay. Another European country that's standing up against a corrupt government are the people of the Czech Republic. The Czech government currently has a 90% disapproval rate, and the people have actually stood up, closed down the country the other day for a whole day, and will continue to do that because the people are organized, because they still have unions. Unions are the things that you and I in the United States voted out of existence because we decided that we loved our masters and we trusted them. How stupid can you be? But I've lived in a dozen different countries so far around the world, and what I notice about corrupt governments is I'm not so much worried about corrupt governments anymore. I'm more concerned about how corrupt are the people. Because if a government can corrupt the people like they've done in the United States and beyond madness in New Zealand, it's a place you just don't want to live. You can live with a corrupt government. You cannot live with a population, with a people who have capitulated to the concepts of our master, which is hatred and cruelty, viciousness, and fear. So look at the people, not the government. Along those lines, I thought we might chat about there are no survivors. And I think it's important that you understand what our masters are willing to do to us, simply because they consider us to be garbage cattle. The CIA, mindless, brutish thugs, low-life scum of the earth, the NSA, controls them, and they're all owned by the Rockefeller family. The CIA came into existence at about the time I was born, 1958. And originally it was the OSS, and it was a government agency, but old George Bush, Magog to his pals. And the Dulles brothers, D-U-L-L-E-S, you'll find virtually nothing on the Dulles brothers in history. Criminals beyond anything you can possibly imagine. Old George Bush turned the OSS into the CIA. The CIA, the NSA are all owned by the Rockefeller family. This is not a government agency. It is not a, well, they're the mafia on steroids. But still in all, they're run by street thugs, mostly ex-military intelligence, at least when I was a kid. And by that time, World War II had been over for about 12, 14 years. And the only survivors coming out of World War II, from the American point of view, were the scum of the earth. The best and the brightest had gone into the war at first and been killed for no particular reason. And they still needed people to fight a war. So instead of having the best and the brightest, you have, well, what you have in New Zealand, you have morons. And so the morons came out of the war as heroes. They actually hadn't accomplished anything. And so these low-level street thugs went from being U.S. Army Corps U.S. Army Air Corps intelligence officers to CIA street thugs, monsters, bullies, thugs, extortionists, gun runners, child rapers, extortionists, real estate scammers, just the true scum of the earth, which is, of course, the heart and soul of the CIA. And since our masters are all practitioners of black magic, of course, everything that the CIA does has a black magic background to it. They commit atrocities on certain key dates in the calendar. 9/11, if you look up the date in 9/11 in American history, you'll see that a number of atrocities have been committed throughout time on September 11th. Why? Well, it has something to do with the black magic calendar. These are key dates in black magic where atrocities must be committed, where the innocent must suffer horribly. And it accomplishes something in the black magic agenda. What? I haven't a clue. And I really don't want to know at this point, to be honest with you. But even though I'm in Europe now, I keep running into these CIA thugs who are just useless and stupid people. And I was contacted about 6 months ago by yet what I thought was another victim of the CIA. Turned out he was a willing participant. And I could tell from the speech pattern in his emails that he was, or I thought he was, another survivor of CIA atrocities. He wasn't. He was a willing participant. And spending the last 6 months plus talking to this guy, I haven't had a real job in 4 years. I haven't had a paying job in 6 months or more. So I was willing to write his book for him on speculation, write his screenplay of his life on speculation, because I just needed money. And I was so accustomed as a child to being, having my life threatened and having my bones broken, that whenever he would go on to one of these I am God routines of his, because he was a CIA agent and they were the chosen of God and the rest of us were scum, I just sort of looked the other way because I really wasn't impressed. I just wanted to make some money. But I was constantly reminded, at least now, that liars lie. And this guy, as a good CIA asset, was lying to himself about pretty much his entire life. Which then got me to the concept, once I realized what was going on with this guy. And because I told him from day one, Rosario, your story doesn't make any sense. And when all the pieces finally fell into place, and it took 6 months or so, I finally realized he wasn't a ex-CIA agent. What he was a current CIA asset. And whereas he thought of himself as, above James Bond, he's actually just a 5-year-old child playing at being a grown man. And then I realized the other thing that I've never wanted to face. There are no survivors. Once the CIA gets their hands on you, and they do whatever they want to you, and if somehow your body survives, you didn't. There are no survivors. The project I was involved with before I was even born was a project of the CIA based in black magic, where they wanted psychic super soldiers. They wanted killing machines who can read people's minds, move objects, all that nonsense. And in black magic ritual, everything is based on horror and suffering and fear and blood. I don't understand the medical aspects of it, and I understand way too much of the black magic methodology, but part of this process, at least in the experiment that I was a part of, which they have, by the way, refined. I've met second and third generation survivors, quote unquote, of the same types of experiments. The same methodology. It's always, we're placed in military families, we're placed with families where abuse is going to be ongoing, where violence is a regular activity of the day, broken bones are a regular day, abuse and torture is a regular part of the day. It's part of the programming that the CIA, under their black magic ritual, have come up with. Thankfully, the people who run the CIA and the NSA are morons, so very few of their projects actually work. Unfortunately, there are so many projects. We're just, eventually the odds will, make some of these projects work. Right now, for example, the United States of America has military bases in virtually every country of the world. I think it's like 178. And quite a few of those are actually CIA military bases, because the CIA buys their equipment from the same suppliers that the regular military does, so you really don't know if it's a U.S. government military base or it's a CIA military base. Of course, at this point in time, they're the same because the Federal Republic of the United States no longer exists, and we're now a privately owned offshore corporation, the United States of America, Inc. But our masters truly are not the brightest people you've ever met. A few of them are, but most of them are just morons, which means their servants are morons. But they do have the rituals passed down from generation to generation, and some of those people were frighteningly intelligent. Look up a guy by the name of Albert Pike. That's a terrifying concept. He was a genius. But the project that I was a part of, and I've since met, well, I can't even say met, I only knew one survivor, one person whose body didn't die. I've seen pictures of others of the project, and they're scattered all over the world now. I've been routinely pointed out to me, oh, do you know that guy? Says, yeah, looks vaguely familiar. Why? Oh, that's a very long, complicated story I don't want to get into. But there are people whose bodies didn't die. We're not survivors. No, none of us survived. The people whom nature thought we would be were destroyed. The people who we could have been are dead. The people we dreamed about becoming are dead. They're all dead. Any of us who are still walking around are just a collection of scars that we managed ourselves to stitch back together. My very earliest conscious memory of this existence is sitting on the floor in a very dark room with my back up against the wall, and I'm looking up into the face of a very large woman with hair like Brillo. And behind this woman there's a light source. It's either a lamp or a window. But the rest of the room is dark, and all I can really see is this woman's head silhouetted from the light behind her. And she's punching me in the face with her fist as hard as she can. And I don't even bother to defend myself. I'm just looking up at her. She's punching me in the face. It's probably one of the times my nose was broken. My nose is still broken. That's my earliest memory of this existence. I have another memory, the second memory of earliest memory, of myself, again, not even 5 years old, sitting propped up in an empty room, a room where, they threw trash and bits of junk, whatever is left over. And I'm sitting there on the floor with the rest of the junk. And it's not so much a memory, but an image of myself as a broken doll. That the only time anyone ever played, quote unquote, with me, the broken doll, was when they wanted to hurt something. When they wanted something alive and had feelings, and they could tear apart with their bare hands and pummel and break and rip and tear. I wouldn't fight back. And my second clearest memory of this life is myself sitting there in that room with the rest of the junk on the floor. And like a scarecrow from The Wizard of Oz, stuffing the straw back inside of me and then stitching it up, trying to keep it from falling out again. That's what the CIA did to me, to a lot of people. And I've met a lot of people. In Los Angeles, it's sort of in Southern California, I guess, it's sort of it's one of their major testing grounds, I would imagine. I'm hoping that's what it is. I'd hate to think that they're doing this at that scale, at that level, with that number of people throughout the United States. That's a thought that stops me cold. But there are no survivors. We're just a collection of scars that we've knitted together ourselves. We're a bunch of broken dolls that after being torn to pieces, we lie with the rest of the garbage on the floor and try to stitch ourselves back together. This is what we are to our masters. You need to know that. Part of the black magic ritual that created me and a number of different people, at least a dozen that I know of, involved being a fetus inside of a woman's womb. And always we had to be the second fetus. I don't understand the medical procedure that they did back then. But we were always the second child. So there were two fetuses in this woman's womb. And in order, under black magic ritual, to make the second fetus, which would have been me, psychic, the first fetus has to be ritually sacrificed while in the woman's womb. Because in black magic, hate, horror, fear, terror, and blood are required. So the first fetus, in this particular case, was a female, a girl. Under black magic ritual, a device was put into the woman's womb, and this first fetus, this child, this little girl, was butchered alive. I think it's the first trimester, I think. And her butchered body, that her spirit's already connected to, the spirit connects to the fetus the moment the sperm penetrates the egg. It's sort of a call to the universe saying, hey, we've got an opening here. And a spirit automatically, a soul automatically attaches to it. This is a black magic belief, by the way. The fact that it's true or not, it's up to you to decide if you believe it or not. And so this little girl, this little soul, is hacked to pieces inside of her own mother's womb. And in black magic ritual, as this little body is cut to pieces inside of her own mother's womb, her spirit, her soul, explodes out of her little body. And it automatically reaches for the nearest living, closest thing in her universe that she knows, which is, of course, the second fetus, which was me. Somehow, the black magic ritual theory is that the combination of two souls, or the energy of her soul passing into mine, would make me psychic. And somehow, in the moron mental capacity, reasoning process, this will make us evil and wicked and want to hurt people. Well, sadly for the CIA, that didn't happen. As far as I know, of the 13 children who came out of this experiment, of which there are no survivors, I'm one of them. All of us became pacifists. All of us, the idea of violence was just horrifying to us. We didn't want to hurt anybody. So from a CIA black magic point of view, the experiment was a horrific failure. My last living relative, my cousin, he was also not a survivor of another experiment, very similar to the one I went through, I'm pretty sure. We didn't talk about things like that then. It was too horrifying. The other thing I noticed is whenever I heard about another not survivor of these experiments and someone said, well, have you seen him? He's just down the corner. I couldn't go anywhere near him. I met one woman who was a second or third generation experiment. And she was very beautiful. We spent a wonderful afternoon together, but then we sort of, couldn't be in the same room with each other ever again. Another really beautiful woman I met. It was funny, she lived in the Hollywood Hills, and I was introduced to her. And she had a pet pig that when she got, a little tiny thing, of course, now it was like 500-600 pounds, and it's living in her front room. It was really bizarre, but it was really bizarre. And she took one look at me, I took one look at her, and we both did an about face and ran away from each other because we recognized each other as having gone through the same type of experimentation that had created us, or for which there are no survivors. So we tend not to spend a lot of time with each other, but for some reason my cousin and I did. He was my last living relative, and as I said, part of the CIA black magic ritual is to make sure that these fetuses are placed in women that are military families or military connected, and so will obey orders, or simply are sycophants and bootlickers and ass kissers and things that simply want to be considered important. And there has to be a tremendous amount of violence in the family, and that certainly qualifies for where I came from, and my cousin as well. Nice little fella. He was about, 15 years younger than I was. And I was at the dentist office, and this is in Hollywood. And one of the very, very, very rare occasions where a pretty girl was being nice to me at the dentist office, and we were talking and chatting. And just as I was about to ask her for her phone number, something told me in my mind, go home. Go home now. And so, I left this very rare experience. A pretty girl was being nice to me in Hollywood. And I excused myself and I went home as fast as I could. Part of the reason we're pacifists is we can actually feel the universe around us. We can hear the universe breathing. We can hear our mother crying. I'm not talking about our physical mother, I'm talking about all of our mother. The mother of all of us, whoever, whatever that might be. So you really don't want to be violent in your mother's presence. You can do the same thing. All it requires is a small amount of calm inside of yourself and just listen. First you have to listen to yourself, then you have to learn to listen to your body, then you have to learn to listen to the world around you, then you have to learn to listen to other people. Listening is not a favored skill amongst our masters, because the moment you stop listening to them and you start listening to yourself, you discover that our masters are nothing but parasites. They have no value to you or to our world at all. So at this moment, I'm talking to this pretty girl at the dentist's office, and I hear something in my head says, go home now. And so I rush home as fast as I can. And there's my cousin standing at my front doorstep. And he's sort of like a limp statue. His mouth is hanging open and he's trying to get breath, and his eyes are sort of glazed and over in pain. And he sees me coming up the corridor, and he just sort of leans his head over and stares at me blankly. And so I get him inside and get him sat down, and I had gone through this so many times myself. You can't really see the horror as a memory, but you know it's there. And so just the shadow of the event, just the memory of being horrified is enough just to leave you limp and trying to get breath in your body. And so I sat him down in my dirty little flat, tried to get some water into him, and he couldn't drink, and he couldn't hold the cup. So this was a regular day for me, but even I could tell that this was going too far. So I knew if I called for an ambulance, a couple of hours would go by. So I ran outside really quick and pounded on all the doors in the hallway, and I said, "Please, I need to get to the hospital. My cousin's sick. Could you please drive me?" And then ran back in to take care of him. So I'm holding him, and a couple of the cattle sort of mooed their way to my front door and said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "I need to get him to the hospital." And so I finally managed to convey this concept to these simpletons. And one said he would go get his shoes and his car keys. And the rest just sort of stand there and sort of wander away like sheep. By this point in time, my cousin can't even talk. And he just slides down off the chair onto the floor. So I'm holding him in my arms. And he starts to scream. And he just keeps screaming. And he's screaming, and I'm holding him, and I've got my left arm across his chest. I've got my right hand on his chest. I've got my left arm around his shoulders, and my right hand on his chest. So I can feel his heart beating. His heart's beating faster and faster, and he's screaming. He never makes a sound, and he's screaming. Never makes a sound. And the look of horror on his face. He's not having memories of horror. He's actually, as far as I could tell, actually seeing the true event as it actually happened to him. It's no longer a shadow. It's no longer a Disney cartoon caricature of horror. It's the real horror. And he just keeps screaming. And so he doesn't make a sound. But the look on his face, I'll never forget. And so I start to scream. I scream for my neighbors. I don't scream for an ambulance. I don't scream, "Get us to the hospital." I scream, "Get me a gun. Somebody get me a gun." Because I was going to shoot my cousin in the head. Just to put him out of his misery, just so the pain would stop. Thankfully, they were cattle, so none of them brought me a gun. And he's sitting there on the floor, and I'm holding him up, and I'm crying. Like I said, my left arm was around his shoulders, and my right hand was on his chest. And he's screaming, because he's remembering everything. I hope to God not, but from the look on his face, he must be. And finally, the idiot with the shoes and the car keys walks in and says, "I'm ready to go." And I can feel with my right hand over his chest that his heart stops beating. And I just sort of say out loud, "Never mind." And so I'm sitting there on the floor of my dirty little apartment, just off Ventura Boulevard, holding my cousin in my arms, and he's dead. And his eyes are still open, and his mouth is still wide open, and he's still screaming. And so I sort of lay him down, finally, on his back. And his eyes are still open, and his mouth is still open, and he's still screaming. The look of horror on his face. He was remembering everything. And so I went, got my favorite jacket, tucked it up over him. And at the time, I was thinking, well, I'll just wait. I'll get some sleep. And then I'll carry him up into the hills, and I'll bury him under a tree, and then I'll go over to the store, get some flowers, and plant flowers on his grave. He'd like that. And finally, at some point, the ambulance did show up, and they took him away. This is what our masters are willing to do to us. They were doing it then. They're still doing it now. This is who and what our masters are. Wherever they go, there are no survivors. It's really up to you. Me, I would say arrest them, put them on trial, get all of our money back from them. Don't hurt them. Just lock them up. Put them in prison. Lock the doors. Weld the doors shut. Give them food, give them water. Other than that, just leave them alone. The masters, the mandarins servants, and the slaves of the servants, just collect them all. You and I have been on this world for 2.5 billion years. It's time for this to end. It's time for this to stop. Or there will be no survivors anywhere on this earth. And when the last of our masters and their servants have died of old age, we didn't kill any of them, we didn't harm physically any of them. All we did was try them for their crimes, put them in prison, lock them up, and left them alone. And we did the two worst things possible we could to them. One, we told them we don't need them. Two, we left them alone. We left them alone with each other. So they had no one to feed on except each other. And when the last of them has died, concrete. Build a huge pyramid, one you can see from space. And on that pyramid, plaques in every language known that tells exactly the same story. Who these creatures were, what they did to us, and what the final outcome was. We drove them off our world, and they'll never return. And they'll never return because we will never forget. It's up to you. An ancient Irish blessing, an ancient Celtic dream for a friend or a beloved stranger, I give to you. May you live as long as you wish. May you love as long as you live. For the 2012fad.com, this is Charlie Bluehawk. The 2012 Fad is brought to you by Coffee and Blood, Love Letters Between the Dead, a series of 5 erotica horror novels about a fallen angel finding his way back to regain his own soul, and how the CIA war against the human race, their black magic, captures and traps him in the body of a mind-controlled slave designed to hunt down and to kill their god, their Satan.